Hello, Hockey World. Today is Wednesday, February 1st, 2017.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Lagello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Eklund will be with us momentarily. We will be discussing the firing of Ken Hitchcock in St. Louis and some of the games from last night. But we want to start off with something we talked about yesterday, Russ. We were talking about the top 100 and names that we would take off and names that we would put on. And I got a couple responses about thinking I was completely clueless for removing Billy Smith. But there was one that you said we got a message on Twitter.
Pat LaFontaine.
Pat LaFontaine, that's right. Okay.
And my answer to that was basically we were having a conversation. He was in the conversation, but I said ultimately he wasn't on my list because I didn't put him as one of the five I took out or added. So that was just my feeling, was like, hey, we felt like he was worthy of conversation. I think that was the thing that the point I was trying to get across is we were talking about a lot of guys like, hey, they're worthy of being in this conversation. Still doesn't mean they make the list.
Right, and if you know, I put LaFontaine in that Cam Neely territory where he's a Hall of Famer, but the career was shortened by injury. And anybody, you know, obviously I was in Buffalo, so I had a unique perspective of that. Yes. You know, when he got slammed and concussed, I think it was Francois Leroux, Penguins defenseman. His career was never the same. I mean, he came back a couple times, came back with the Sabres a couple times, was a shadow of his former self. Then played for the Rangers. They traded, I think it was second-round pick for him. He was never the same type of player with the Rangers.
He looked good for the Rangers for a little while until his own player ran into him. But that was when he was starting to wear the helmet and he had the mouthpiece in, and he was thinking that would keep him from concussion, and it didn't.
Yeah. So it's a shame because I definitely agree with LaFontaine being a Hall of Famer. I think he's a great player, and I believe he was the 81 draft. I think
that's right. I mean, he's a fringe guy for this kind of list. He was a heck of a player. That's all we were saying.
Yeah, and Cam Neely, he made the Hall of Fame, but that Ulf Samuelsson hit, that essentially limited his effectiveness and ruined his career. So. You can go and look at exceptions to the rule in the Pro Football Hall of Fame with Gale Sayers, whose career was shortened by numerous knee injuries, I believe. Yeah. Kirby Puckett and a few others in baseball where their careers were shortened by injuries or whatever. And the exceptions are made, but we're talking about a top 100 list. And if I'm going to take off guys like Bob Gainey and Serge Savard, who had 7 Stanley Cups, because I didn't think they were good enough to make the list.
I took Henri Richard. I did.
So, okay. We may have to touch on this when Eck gets on the show because I'm sure he has an opinion.
I got a little sidebar we could do. I wrote an article today for Go GTS. They're online. I always retweet them. I write for them. And it's a collectibles-based article, but it's about Mitch Marner, and it got me into digging into Mitch Marner a little bit. And the two things that really stood out was, well, 3 things. The first thing is they have him listed at 6 foot. He's not 6 foot, but that's okay. The second part was, for all the talk about the durability, and I raised my hand with that too because he had slight of frame, he has not missed a game. Right. That is maybe the most incredible stat for Mitch Marner this year, that he's at least played in every game. Not to say he hasn't missed shifts, because he has, but that's really an unbelievable thing. I'm not sure anybody knew that was going to happen.
Yeah, he's had his bell rung a couple times. He's missed, like you said, he had to go off the ice one game for, I think, concussion protocol and came back. Yes. In that sense, he's similar to Goudreau, and Goudreau is elusive and has to be with his size. But the thing is, what I'm concerned about is what happened to Goudreau when the Leafs played the Flames and Leo Komarov caught him good, and it took him a period to come back. Whether Marner, he's a finely tuned athlete. All I know is that during the summer at the rookie scrimmages in July, he said his goal was to make 170 pounds. When he got to training camp, all of a sudden that goal has gone because apparently he didn't get close to 170 pounds.
Well, he's listed as 170, so I had to put it. But he's not, okay?
Right, but he's not. He's 165 maybe. Okay. But does it matter? No. He just got named Rookie of the Month in the NHL for January.
But he's still going to put on muscle. My basic point of the article was he still will do all that. He is a Calder candidate. He's a guy like one of like 6 or 7 guys we'll be talking about, and I think that's great. I was always on the bandwagon of his as far as thinking he had this kind of talent, but I have to admit the durability has been better than expected, and that's something that, hey, I give him full marks. He is a smart kid too. That's the one thing. He's a very smart hockey kid.
Yeah, I agree. And as I said, he was named Rookie of the Month for the month of January. I think the NHL released something on their PR feed on Twitter, and I can't remember a team, so this must be in history, a team that in the first 4 months of the season has had 3 different rookies win Rookie of the Month. The Leafs, Nylander in October, Matthews, I believe, it was December, because Werenski was November, and now Marner in January. So, I mean, Toronto is winning by over 100 points, the most points by a collective rookie squad, because they have 8 rookies. So it's
here's the one thing I'll say. I mean, when I came out with my preseason rankings, I had Matthews 2nd, I had Marner 7th, and I think that's pretty fair. And actually I'm looking it over, and I had Puljujarvi 10th, and I even said, will he stay in Edmonton all season? And he hasn't. So my preseason rankings are pretty good. I had Zacha as 1. He's taken a little while to get going. Now I really like what I see. I had Provorov 1, 2, 3, 4th. I had Line 3rd. Again, Provorov's not going to get votes. Yeah, but he's the best defenseman on Philly. Like, he's having a fantastic year.
It's weird because I've heard some criticism of, we know that Edmonton is open for criticism based on what they've done over the last few years, but I heard some criticism about how they've handled Puljujarvi this year. And honestly, they did the same thing with Draisaitl. They played him 40 games. They realized it was too much for him. They sent him to junior. Puljujarvi, since he's from Finland, played in the Finnish Elite League last year. They have the ability to send him down to the American Hockey League, which they did. I think that's better for him. But it doesn't mean because they had to send him to the AHL that he's a bust.
No, look at Draisaitl now. I mean, he's having a great year. I mean, really a fantastic year. He's a guy that really doesn't even get talked about much.
I really don't think that the Arizona Coyotes right now think that Dylan Strome is a bust because Mitch Marner made the NHL this year, and Dylan Strome was playing in the World Junior and is still playing for the Erie Otters. I mean, players mature at different speeds, at different levels.
They really do. It sounds cliche, but fans get really fed up with timelines, and so do some media people. But here's a good one. As an example, I'm watching the game behind me, which happens to be the Coyotes. Who gets a breakaway? Brendan Perlini. Well, if you would think in real time, you'd be like, wow, really? He didn't make it to the NHL until this year? He's 20.
Yeah.
Like, we forget about this, and he's got 7 goals, and he looks really good. We just forget that there is a timeline for most players. Not everybody gets to play in their first year. Even Mitch Marner did not play in his first year. So, we got to I go back to that, and I say, you're right. Everybody goes at their own speed, and that means I'm even seeing, and this is why I never got off the bandwagon, there is good play now out of Griffin Reinhart in down below in the AHL, and so there's talk that he could get a recall at some point. That's why with defensemen it can take until 24, 25. It really can. People don't want to hear it, but it's true.
Well, I saw that once, and you're well aware of this player. I saw that when Dylan McIlrath was waived by the Florida Panthers, and I don't believe he was claimed, so he cleared and now will be going down to the AHL. Yeah. That somebody posted on social media the listing of the draft where he was the first round pick and that Tarasenko was picked. I mean, honestly, all you're doing is that's sort of masochism. That's just making yourself go through pain, because it is an inexact science to know whether.
Well, I'll go so far as to say this: it is an inexact science. There's no question. What I'll say about Tarasenko is, it's not like the Rangers didn't know about his ability. They clearly didn't want to wait the 3 years till his contract ran out.
Right.
St. Louis didn't mind doing that, so they drafted him. That's really what it boiled down to. I mean, teams knew about Tarasenko. I can't rip a team for not taking a guy that was under a pro contract for another 3 years, and there was questions as to how long it would take him to come over.
Right.
That's the way it goes. I mean, I don't kill him on.
And the same thing for Washington with Evgeny Kuznetsov. I mean, they had to wait, I think, 2, maybe 3 years for him to get out of his KHL responsibilities and come over. And now, now he's one of their best players. But it took a while for them to get him to come over.
Yeah, I mean, was it well documented? I wasn't thrilled with the McElrath pick. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Was it also well documented that I wasn't thrilled with the Hugh Jessamine pick? Absolutely. I still give these guys a chance, though, and I gave them a chance really to the bitter end. Because you never know. And now we know. I saw last year when everybody was still sort of praising McElrath that, hey, you know what? He is a really limited player who could get some NHL time once in a while. And, for a team like the Rangers, it wasn't enough. And I don't blame them. If you're going to bring him there for toughness, you have a defenseman who's going to be in the penalty box for at least 5 minutes a game. That really hurts your other pairings. You can't have defensemen fighting. So I always thought that was a bad thing. Me personally, I never want to draft a defenseman that's like a pugilist. I don't want to do it.
Yeah, but there is still a benefit for size in this league. I mean,
oh, sure.
Yeah, I mean, when we saw that at the top prospects game. I mean, a guy. But
he had that shattered kneecap. That's the other part that people seem to forget too. We had Gordy Clark on our show. He explained how McElrath's kneecap was in pieces. They had to put that back together. He did make an amazing comeback. I give the kid full credit, but that definitely hurt his career. There's no way around it.
Okay, let's get to the news of the day. Like I said, Ack will be here any minute.
Let's talk about games then. We'll wait on the other.
Okay, well, so we'll start with the one that I watched the most, which was the Dallas Stars and the Maple Leafs. You could see this throughout the league with a number of games where some teams didn't react well to the 4-day break. I mean, there were teams that were hot. I mean, the Islanders were the exception. They went into the break, one of the hottest teams, and came out with a victory. The Leafs were 9-0-2 on the road until they lost in Philadelphia, game that you were at on Thursday.
Right.
Come out and they were comatose in the first period against the Dallas Stars. Dallas scored 5 goals, chased Freddie Anderson after 3 goals and 8 shots. The Leafs woke up in the second period, got a couple goals, got back into the game, but it was just too much too soon, or too much to overcome, and they lose 6-3. Not something that Leaf fans should panic about, but there is a school of thought that you've got all these rookies, you've got a team that is overachieved, a team that has been without Morgan Riley now for 6 games, who are under 500 without Morgan Riley in the lineup, and maybe they sort of bitten off more than they can chew. I mean, Babcock did not react negatively, super negatively after the game. He's trying to put in perspective, but now they've lost 2 regulation games in a row, and everybody gained on them. So this might be the beginning of the reset for the league.
I think it's leveling off. I do. I mean, I looked at their last 10. I'm a fan of that, even though there was a break, and I think they're 5-4-1 in their last 10. That's a telling stat. This is something where they rode it high. Everything was clicking. They looked great. Fans saw the potential. Like Babcock saw the potential. But now you're seeing the leveling off point. And look, and there was going to be a leveling off for Freddie Anderson too. I mean, for his hot streak, he probably wasn't talked about enough. He was one of the better goalies in the league for that span of time. Yeah. But again, he doesn't have the greatest defense in front of him, and so there is a limit as to how long a goalie could ride a wave like that.
I mean, their defense is flawed with Riley in the lineup. Without Riley, they've had to move Jake Gardner up, and Jake Gardner, to my memory, was on the ice for at least 2 of the goals, maybe 3. Martin Marincin, who is a favorite, to pick on for a lot of Leaf fans, must have gone to Spain during the All-Star break because he had perfected the Toreador defense, just letting the guys go right through to the net. And some of the rookies really didn't stand out. I mean, Marner had a nice game, but yeah, there was something missing there, especially early in the game. And I'm assuming Babcock read them the riot act after the first period, and they woke up then. But just not a good effort coming out of the gate. And now, Russ, and we'll talk about Hitchcock in a minute, but they walk in tomorrow. They play the Blues in St. Louis with Mike Yeo taking over as coach. And you know that the usual MO is that a team with a new coach, even if the guy was an assistant coach, they want to step up their effort to make a good first impression. That's a tough thing for the.
That's a tough game for the Leafs to win now. It is.
Yeah.
There's no question. I'll talk a little bit about the Ranger game. I mainly watched that because after we talked about the extension for Vigneault, my contention was it's not going to make a difference to the team how they play. It's just a reward, and that really held true. They still had the same flaws playing at home lately. Lately at home, it's a mixed bag for them. They were down 5-0 quick.
Yeah.
I mean 3-0 quick, and Lundqvist was out. Again, I have to say to Vigneault, you have to let this guy work it out. You are not going to win anything by bringing Antti Ranta into games like that. He gave up another 3. Now, the Rangers did score a few, which is fine, but, most Ranger fans identified the fact that they played 20 minutes of hockey. Can't do it. This is getting to be the important part of the season. I saw quotes from Ryan McDonough, who I have great respect for, and he was like, I don't get what this slow starts are. This is where you have to look at the coach and the coaching staff and say, you've got players here. There is talent here. If the game's not starting off the way you want it to start off, and this is still the regular season, what's going to happen in the playoffs? Clearly, there's a switch that needs to be turned on for a lot of these players to light a fire under them, and the coach needs to do that. He just got a raise, so now, to me, that adds a little more pressure. This is the problem that I was saying about the Rangers. They're a little comfortable right now. The goalie isn't. I mean, Lundqvist is still battling, but they're not. The team itself seems a little comfortable. They're having trouble on defense, and I don't think you can keep pulling Lundqvist. I think you have to let him work it out.
Yeah, I mean they're firmly entrenched in that first wild card, and the reward to finish in third place. And not that they're thinking of this because we're talking 34, 35 games left, so they're not picking opponents for the playoffs. But the reward to move up from the first wild card spot to third place is playing either Pittsburgh or Washington. Would you rather face them, or would you rather face the winner, probably Montreal? I think I'd rather.
Kaya says neither, and I'm going to vote with Kaya because I don't think I want to face any of them if I'm the Rangers. I see them as all losing situations. So, but that's where they're at right now. And so if you're going to make me pick between those teams, yes, I'll pick Montreal.
Okay, one of the other, and I mentioned the Islanders. The Islanders are now.
Watch some of that game. I did.
The Islanders are now 6-0-1 under Doug Weight. They win 3-2 over the Capitals. They're climbing back into the race. And, as Ak has talked about many a time with the Islanders, if they did climb back in, they have some flexibility to be able to make some moves. They have a lot. They have ample supplies on defense. With guys in the minors who might be NHL ready.
Before we talk about the Islanders, I did want to make one key point.
Okay.
Even though it was a 6-3 game, I think it was 6-3 final for the Rangers, or was it 6-4? I forget.
6-4.
Jonas Korpisalo played a hell of a game. Now, this is a thing now where all of a sudden teams are playing backups against the Rangers. Now to go into the Islanders, Philip Grubauer did play against the Islanders. So that is quite a drop-off. I like Grubauer. Don't get me wrong. He's a really good goalie. But when you're not facing Holtby, it does help on a streak like this.
Yeah. I mean, Grubauer's he's a pretty good backup. But, and when at all possible, Bobrovsky played in the All-Star game. They started Korpisalo. Holtby played in the All-Star game. They played Grubauer. So they gave these guys a little bit, even though they flew halfway across the country, they played in a 3-on-3. So I think they were making sure that these goaltenders didn't have the extra wear and tear. And that both Bobrovsky and Holtby, if there's 33 games left, they're probably playing 25 of them the rest of the season.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think that's what the strategy was. And this game featured a lot of hitting. It featured some pretty good goaltending, although we'll see what Thomas Greiss is made of. I've always liked him, but I'm in the same camp with him as Ben Bishop, like 1A kind of goalie. Ben Bishop did have his one season where he was a Vezina guy, but now he seems to have slipped back to a 1A himself.
Yeah,
I think Bryce is a 1A.
Well, I mean, that's and maybe it's stature more than anything. I think Bishop has the ability. The problem with Bishop is he always gets hurt. It's the durability. It's not the physical ability.
Right.
With Grice, it's the physical ability. It's the fact that he's not a big goaltender. I mean, he's a very good goaltender, but the question is, can he play? And now, they have Berube as the number 2. And he's been sitting around for a year and a half waiting to play. So playing him a little more than the normal backup is probably not going to be a problem for him. But it's just a question of whether, they've given them the 3-year extension. They believe he's their number 1 guy. It's just a question of whether he can play the amount of games that a normal number 1 does.
I saw that the defense played well. Letty was having a good game. Boychuk clearly had a good game, had a big goal. Ryan Strome looked good.
Yeah.
That's something that's a big deal now. If Doug Waite could unlock Ryan Strome, that is something that Capuano was unable to do. That could be a big boon for the Islanders down the stretch. But I still say, let's see after 10 games. This is 7 games. This is a new coach. Let's wait until they play a team when they are full strength. Like if the Caps were with Holtby, I would give more weight to the win. But I still think this is a good win. They were at home, or at least their temporary home. And I thought I saw what the Islanders should have been all year, because that's why I thought the Islanders were a pretty good team. I still don't think Andrew Ladd had a great game. Like that's something where, I don't know what's going to happen with that as far as what Doug Waite can do with him, but they got to sort of light a fire under him.
I saw a report yesterday on Twitter. I'm not sure if it was Arthur Staple, but it was one of the reporters who covers the Islanders that said, like, oh my God, everybody, the savior is coming. Mikhail Grabovski is skating again. Please. I mean, if you're depending on Mikhail Grabovski to be the difference between you making and missing the playoffs, you're going to miss the playoffs. If you're
right, I just think they're looking for bodies. Mike. It's just one of those things where.
Yeah, if he's gonna be a fourth line guy, that's fine. Then you have the most expensive 4th line in the history of the NHL right now.
Right, but the Islanders got really desperate there. Like this season was looking like it was down the tubes. Now at least they have a chance to make the playoffs again, and I think just any bodies that they get looks like, hey, we've got more help. I mean, Alan Quine scored the first goal, and Ladd wasn't. He did get an assist on it, but I still don't think Ladd played a great game. Alan Quine's an interesting guy. Like this is a guy who you would swear shouldn't even be in the NHL, but he does come up with some goals, and so you have to ride a guy like that. He's got 5 on the season. We'll see. I mean, this Islander team is a lot better. Beauvillier did get an assist yesterday. Nelson did too. The other guy who I think is starting to get back into the action and I think is important is Casey Kazikas. I've always thought that he's a good disturber, but also a good assist guy, and he did get one yesterday. He's got 14 on the year. That's somebody who I think if they could really get him in there and get him, playing well, that's good.
I think he was suffering from that, like when a role player gets a big contract, and he's not making tons of money, but he's making significant money. But when he starts to get a bigger paycheck, they feel like they have to do more to earn that money. And basically they've been paid to do what they were doing. So just do that. And I think he was trying to do more. Maybe he's getting out of that finally.
Yeah, actually the Islanders are 5-0-1 underweight. So
5-0-1.
So we got to give them another 4 games and see what they look like, because I'm a big 10-game guy. I don't know what you call that. I know they were bad blocks. Are they, rust stop?
5 games.
I don't know. I know. I'm doing 10s. I do 10s. Me and Mike are different.
Yeah, there you go. Penguins win 4-2 over the Nashville Predators. The thing that was of interest, and I can't remember if it was Darren Drager or Pierre Maguire on TSN this morning, who was talking about the Nashville Predators potentially being in on Matt Duchene. That they might, I think it was Maguire, and he had said that Nashville might have the right pieces in terms of what the Avalanche would be looking for, meaning defense. But Look at the Predators. I mean, okay, right now they have Yossi, they have Subban, they have Ekholm, they have Ellis. They trade another one of those guys, then they're just they're like everybody else, where they have a top 2 defense, a third guy is pretty good, and then 4 through 6 is a little questionable. So I don't know whether they're going to make that kind
they
of.
They can't chip away too much.
Right.
You're right about that. They can't chip away too much on their defense.
Now maybe they're concerned about the whole expansion situation, and they don't want to protect 4 defensemen, so they're more willing to trade an Ellis or an Ekholm to get a Duchesne. I don't know. I think that's thinking ahead, but then that's the thing. The thing, Nashville does not strike me as a team that's a Matt Duchesne away from being a Stanley Cup finalist. There's still a lot of flaws with that team.
This could be the same kind of year for Nashville that, like when they added Forsberg and it just wasn't worth adding him, and I think they traded a first rounder for him, and I don't know if I would do that. Like I think I might just roll with what I've got. I don't know. If for me, it's gonna have to be pretty minor if I do something to this team, because I just don't know. And look, they have a good record, but I don't know. I don't know about them.
Yeah. I mean, you have to factor in that Neal's contract is up after next year. They may think that Duchesne is an adequate replacement for him because his contract is another 2 years. Duchesne is a very good player. I'm doubtful whether Colorado is going to get what they're looking for right now before March the 1st. That usual package, the prospect, the NHL player, and the first round pick. I just don't know whether they're going to get that. If they do get that, so much the better for them. But I just can't see it. But we'll see. Another interesting game.
I will say this: they got another goal out of Yarncroc, and so he's up to 8 now. So if they figured out how to unlock him, that's a pretty big deal. Now here's something: Harry Zolnicek got on the board. And he's a guy that's sort of been traveled around, right?
Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, I think New Jersey for a while.
Philly, Pitt. I remember him in Philly, and then Pitt, and the Islanders, Anaheim, and now Nashville. It's interesting how he's sort of
he's the 23rd player. He's been a 23rd player on a lot of teams.
Yeah, it's interesting how he's getting play. He's in 13 games already.
Yeah. Now the Carolina Hurricanes with an impressive 5-1 victory over the Philadelphia Flyers.
I didn't see any of that game.
Yeah, I didn't see much of it. I saw highlights, but Sebastian Aho with a hat trick. Russ,
no stranger to this show, right? I've extolled his virtue.
Not to pat ourselves on the back, but after seeing him play at the World Junior last year with Laine and with Puljujarvi, after seeing him, we've seen him a lot.
Yeah.
This is a quality player, and we knew once they got Teravainen, they had Lindholm, they add Aho. I mean, Carolina, they're an up and coming team. There's still some holes there, but I mean, Bill Peters is getting the most out of them. Cam Ward's having a great year, and they're getting scoring out of these young forwards. I mean, Cam
Ward only had to make 15 saves. This is something where if you look at Philadelphia, the last thing you're seeing, you would think you would be worried about is shots on goal.
Yeah, no, but and the comparison is there between Carolina and Toronto, because Carolina and Toronto are coached by Babcock and Peters, who was his assistant. Yeah. They play basically the same type of game. The difference between Carolina and Toronto is Carolina has depth on the blue line. You're talking Slavin, you're talking Falk, Hannafin, Pesci, Brian Murphy, and Hainsey. Their defense is solid and deep, and some of their forwards have to take some extra chances, and that's where they get in trouble. But the young forwards are starting to come around, and if they can continue to get consistent scoring, they're going to be in the playoff mix.
Well, this is a team that's chasing the Flyers. They knew that they had to do something. They did. The Flyers did not have any kind of desperation. This was just, if not their worst game of the year, one of them. I mean, they were trailing 5-0 for a lot of that game, well into the third period. This is, you could say what you want about Philly's defense, and I'll agree with you on that. They got a ton of offensive players, a ton. And while Carolina's defense is much improved, don't tell me they couldn't have gotten more shots on goal than that.
Yeah. Now Buffalo plays the Canadiens 5-2. Habs win over the Sabres. Now that's following up on a game before the All-Star break where the Sabres went into the Bell Center and won, and Robin Lehner stood on his head. Didn't happen this time. He gives up 5 goals. Sabres were making a little bit of a move here.
In this one, Pacioretty had a hat trick, right?
I believe so.
And that's a big deal. They unlock him, and now I'm starting to hear talk about Hansel through the Habs. If they do this, I'm telling you, the Rangers will get wiped out by them. Like, I just don't think they'll even be able to stand up to them. It might be a 5-game series.
Yeah, Galchenyuk was back after the break, which is big for them. They're sort of moving around the pieces on the blue line. Like they brought in Nesterov from Tampa Bay. They waived Mark Barberio today. Which is sort of an inconsequential move, but there's been some talk about them maybe moving Nathan Beaulieu out in a trade for a forward. And if that's the deal, that's Hansel. I mean, you add Hansel to Plekanec and Galchenyuk up the middle. That's pretty solid. I mean, you don't need a ton of goals with Carey Price if Carey Price is Carey Price. You don't need a ton of goals to win playoff series. Hansel is not going to score tons of goals, but he can help, and he'll help as a depth player. He'd be a perfect third-line center for that team. So if they can,
he really would. I just think, boy, if they do that, that's a pretty big add. Hey, we let's get off this for a minute and talk about the goalie pants, because that's coming into play this week.
Okay.
And Ken Campbell wrote something for the Hockey News. We like Ken Campbell. And me personally, as I get older, I like my pants to be fuller fitting. And apparently goalies feel the same way. So now it's interesting which goalies like them and which ones don't. Bobrovsky is okay with it. He says, you know what, I got used to it. Mike Smith, not a fan.
Yeah.
See, he thinks it's ridiculous. Guys shoot really hard, and we're already giving up a lot more scoring chances than we have in the past. And try to make an equipment change mid-season doesn't make any sense. So Mike Smith is not happy.
Apparently, Martin Jones got into them before it was mandated. He knew that was coming, so he wanted to get used to it, and got into the new pants before the drop dead date, which was
interesting. Now here's an interesting one. Devin Dubnyk said, "I'm not going to tell you what he thinks of them."
which that tells me he doesn't like them. I'm sorry if you're not going to say.
Yeah. He does go on to say he doesn't like it changing mid-season. That's his biggest problem. So now it says, let's see, Kay Whitmore is the guy that worked with the goalies and the manufacturers. So he's the guy. Remember, we were wondering who was going to be tasked with this. He was tasked.
For those who don't know, Kay Whitmore is a former NHL goaltender, played, I think, with Vancouver and Hartford. He's been with the NHL for a while. He's the guy who breaks out the measuring tape and is checking everybody's inseams or whatever. But I mean, that's his job. And I mean, this is only the beginning, Russ, because it's not. This is just the pants.
I know.
What's going to happen with the pads, with the gloves? It's the blockers, the shoulder pads. It's like all this is going to be subject to review and change.
Now, here's the part that sort of makes sense. Both Crawford and Holtby talked about, because there's a little lacking in padding, they're hoping they don't get stingers out of them with the hips. And that's a fair thing to say, because, the hip bones for the goalie is a pretty big deal. They're facing these big shots. You need padding there. The body doesn't have any padding there. And so we're going to see now if this becomes an issue for the goalies. That's, I think that's a fair thing. Tuukka Rask said the timing could have been better, but what can you do? You can't fight City Hall. Now, I think that's a great statement coming from a Finnish kid that he's been in this country long enough.
He's been watching too many 30s and 40s movies. He's been watching.
He uses an American cliche. That's great.
Yeah. Couple games we'll just go quickly over here. Devils beat the Red Wings 4-3. Kyle Palmieri with 2 goals.
Yeah, the Red Wings doesn't look good for them.
No, and with every loss, and apparently Ken Holland came out and said, well, the next week or two is going to speak to what I'm sorry. He's got to say that. He's got to be diplomatic. I would be stunned if they're not sellers. He's already come out and said he's not going to be a buyer, so it's going to be essentially stick with what we got or sell. And when you have UFAs like Vanek and Ott, who would be a good ad for, as a veteran guy for a team, as a fourth line guy, or Brendan Smith, who needs for teams that need a defenseman, you're going to move these guys, because if you're not going to, you can go back and sign Vanek in the summer if you really want him that badly. But yeah, no, I cannot see that them, unless they win like 7 in a row, them being anything other than a seller.
Now, I do have. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I do have some breaking news. I think it's worthy of talking about because it affects the Northeast. MSG signed a digital deal with the NHL to have MSG Go. This is a big deal because, look, the Rangers in the NHL, when it comes to digital rights, have not always seen eye to eye, right? I mean, so this is a real feather in Gary Bettman's cap. Now, the interesting thing about the service is it's a TV everywhere thing, but you need pay TV authentication. So this is like, for those people that stream everything and say, screw the cable company, I don't need the cable company, you're not going to be able to get this because you're going to have cable service authentication, like, when it pops up with like the 7 boxes.
Right. Unlike HBO Go, where you can buy HBO Go separately from HBO, you have to be a Spectrum Time Warner customer and enter in your password to be able to qualify for this.
Yeah, so this affects the Rangers, Islanders, Devils, and Sabres. But I think, again, we don't get as many complaints now, but we used to get a lot of complaints like, hey, not all these Ranger games are in HD on the package. Well, I think that will solve that now.
Let me. This is a personal complaint, so
yes.
Turn off the show for 2 seconds. Okay, go ahead. One of the things that drives me crazy about the NHL Center Ice package is the fact, last night there were 14 games, so they're challenged. And there were like maybe 8 or 9 that started between 7 and 8:30. So you had to move some games over to the non-HD channels. Of course, the one that I was watching, primarily the Leafs and the Stars, was one of those games. Of course, the one that I was watching, I was not getting the Toronto feed. I was getting the Dallas feed. So, I have to watch Fox Sports Texas or Fox Sports Southwest. Yeah, when I could be watching.
Show your hate for Texas, Mike. Keep it under control.
Well, okay, yeah, okay. They killed Kennedy there. How do you like that? No, but I'm just saying, it's like, give me the on the Game Center Live on NHL.com. You have the option. You can watch the home broadcast or away broadcast, but because it's the Center Ice package and they have a limited number of channels, they can't do that. But it seems to me always when, they will give you, even when the Leafs are at home, they will give you Fox Sports Nashville or whatever. It's just all I want. Like Leaf fans or somebody who covers the team wants the Toronto perspective, not to hear that the Leafs finished in 30th place last year from 3 or 4 different, like 5 or 6 different times. I know they finished in 30th place. You're not telling me anything I don't know. So anyway, there's my.
That's fair. I tend to think that your hate of Texas. I have to go look it up. Were any of the 4 Super Bowl losses for the Bills in Texas? I'll have to see. No,
but they lost to a Texas-based team twice.
See, there you go. I knew it. I knew there was a connection.
Okay, so the Boston Bruins win 4-3 over the Tampa Bay Lightning.
This is a problem now.
Everybody has been saying for weeks, we're waiting for the Lightning to strike. When are they going to strike? Because they're just not doing it.
They're not doing it. This is huge. I think they need to literally make a trade today. I think it's this urgent to get their season going. How many points are they exactly out?
I can check the standings while we're talking.
Yeah. I just think now I gotta see.
Tampa Bay's at 50, 20 they're a game under 500, 22, 23, and 6. They're at 50 points. Philadelphia is the second wild card at 56. So there's 6 points, and they've played 51 games. Philadelphia's played 51 games. So,
So it's a legit 6 points.
Legit 6 points, and you're talking about Florida, Islanders, Carolina, and New Jersey all in between them, and Toronto as well, and Florida. So you're talking climbing over 5 or 6 teams. It's getting to the point now where they better make their move now because they're running.
Yeah, if they don't make their move now, this is going the same way the Canadians did last year, except the Canadians didn't have Carey Price in there, where we just saw the season slipping away. Like, this season is slipping away from them.
Well, I get the fact that maybe Steve Yzerman does not want to operate from a point of desperation. I get that. But you put Stamkos on long-term injury. He reportedly will not be back until the beginning of the playoffs or late in the regular season. You put him on LTIR. You cleared his $8.5 million in salary. The only thing that I think would be the hesitancy here is Tampa Bay not wanting to add money to their budget. And if that's the case, then that's small market mentality there, because this is a team that right now I think they're a defenseman and a forward away from being right back in the mix in the Eastern Conference, and they haven't made that move. Now maybe they're waiting for the prices to come down, but by March the 1st, I mean, we're talking 29 days away from the deadline. By March the 1st, it may be over with, Russ.
Yeah, it's just I'm looking at their defense. Is Slater Cuckoo hurt?
No, he's down in the minors.
They sent him down, so Andre Suster still has a job, right? He was a minus yesterday. Like, there's always a blind spot for a coach and a player, and there's no question in my mind this is the blind spot for this coach and this player.
And on the opposite side, the Bruins have sort of bounced back from at the edge of the precipice with Claude Julien, potentially being fired. I think they've won 3 games in a row. I think they won a couple before the
All. But I was going to make an earth-shattering, assessment here, but you just felt like cutting me off and moving on. No, I'm just kidding. But we look at their defense, and so Schuster's in there. Jake Dotchin is in there for the last 4 games.
Yes, Jake Dotchin, who is the player who, when playing for Syracuse, broke Kasperi Kapanen's leg or ankle.
Right.
On a weird play, so that must have earned the good graces of the Tampa Bay Lightning management staff.
So you figure, if nothing else, if Cuckoo is just maybe he's not quite ready or he's not doing something the coach likes, the rest of their defense is pretty solid. It's clear to me, though, they need to pick up a real veteran defenseman. This is a team that needs a guy who could play. Like, they need to pick up somebody from a team that is lagging, who is looking to move out a 30-something-year-old defenseman. Like, this is the team that needs it.
The Florida Panthers beat the Ottawa Senators 6-5 last night. Most of the offense for the Panthers came from their defense. Michael Matheson with 2 goals, Mark Pysyk with a goal, Jason Demers with a goal.
Mark Pysyk.
Yeah, who is it? Oh, by the way, Dmitry Kulikov scored his first goal for the Buffalo Sabres. So
there you go. So that was good.
For over $4 million, you got 1 goal and about, I think, 3 assists. That great trade there. I think that's sort of part of the downfall of the Sabres this year. Is some of the deals that have been made have not.
We've highlighted it. There's no question that that's a big part. Florida's doing good. I mean, I give Rose some credit. He's rebounded the team to at least the point where they're in it. They're fighting. They're down a lot of players. They're down good players.
Yeah.
But they're staying in it.
Yeah, I know, which is surprising because Barkov is out for the year. I believe they said Huberdeau was out for the year, and that's the case. I mean, that's a big. Vincent Trocheck has really stepped up in the absence of those guys. He was their all-star representative. I just don't know whether, and first of all, I don't know whether they will want to make deals to add players to make a playoff run, or if they'll just write this off as a bad year with a lot of injuries and just come back next year. I mean, this is another year. I mean, Roberto Luongo is not getting any younger, so this is a year that you basically has been thrown away because and Luongo is now 38 years old, so there's not many years left in the tank for Roberto Luongo.
No question.
couple other games. Winnipeg Jets win 5-3 over the Blues. That game, we'll talk about Hitchcock after we just finish.
We buried the lead there, but we were waiting on that.
The Wild beat the Oilers 5-2. They keep rolling. LA Kings beat Arizona 3-2. Anaheim beats the woeful Colorado Avalanche 5-1. And the game that was, and I didn't see any of this game, but I thought this was one of the games of the night, was the Sharks and the Blackhawks. The Sharks winning 3-1. And before the game, I saw reports from some of the Chicago reporters like Mark Lazarus and Chris Hine, who were talking about comments made from Stan Bowman. And okay, we know that general managers will throw out disinformation a month out from the deadline. But basically, Stan Bowman says because of all the young kids that we have, we're probably not interested in making any big acquisition. We're not going to make any top 6 forward acquisition.
Right.
I don't buy it. This is Stan Bowman we're talking about.
I don't buy it either.
Yeah, so I mean, Chicago, people say, well, they'll trade their first round pick, but people don't remember the draft is in Chicago. So they probably are not going to trade their 2017 first. They might trade their 2018 first, which is probably going to be a better draft than the 2017. But if they want to take another run with the group that they have, I mean, maybe they think they're a year away because of all the young guys who replaced the guys like Andrew Shaw. You know, they bring in Mott, they bring in Hartman, they bring in some of the other younger players, and maybe they don't think they're ready. You know, they have the depth to do it. But I still think that if
they still have the guys they had, they're always going to want to make a run, and so they're gonna do something. It's almost not worthy of talking about. I will say this about the Sharks, though. They do seem to have a little bit of swagger right now, and that's a pretty good thing. They've mixed in some of their youth. They've actually, I think they've improved themselves via their farm system. And that was the one thing, even when they lost the Stanley Cup, even when we were saying, hey, the Sharks are getting a little older, they still draft well, and they still really produce players. And so I give them a lot of credit. I think the young legs are really going to help them. Now, here's the interesting thing. They may not have to make that many trades.
The Sharks? No.
To make a run.
I think the Sharks, the only thing that they're going to do is probably add a depth defenseman, a veteran. Now, does that mean they'll trade for Roman Polak again? Probably not. But I mean, actually, somebody like that, just a guy who can play on your bottom pairing, a guy who can kill penalties, who can take some of the minute burden off of Vlasic and Braun and Burns. I mean, Burns is going to be out there in the playoffs for 30 minutes a night. He's going to be. That goes without saying. But you also want to alleviate the special teams burden on your top 4. And if they can get a guy like Polak, and I'm saying, not starting a rumor here, I'm just saying they did that last year. They gave up a couple second round picks in that deal. His value isn't as much as it was last year, but it's somebody that they know about, so it's a possibility. But I don't think they're going to give up anything more than maybe a third round pick for him. But that type of deal is out there, and if they do that, I don't think that they need depth up front. They have the guys that they have. They have Timo Meier, the LeBanc. They have young players, so they can fill.
Meier and Bank played some good minutes yesterday, and so did for Chicago Schmaltz and Hinestroza and Hartman. I mean, Hartman did have too many giveaways, but he did have a couple of hits, and that's a big deal. Both of these teams have now fortified themselves with youth, and they're making the most of it. They have good coaching already. They have a good core. They're both going to be dangerous teams down the stretch. There's no question.
Yep. Now we talked about it briefly off the top. Now we'll just get into it because we're getting to the end of the show here. The Blues did a move that I think we could see coming. We talked about it a little bit over the last month or so, but didn't think it would come to this. And you could tell by the reaction of GM Doug Armstrong that he did not want to do this. But the St. Louis Blues relieved Ken Hitchcock of his duties, and you had the coach in waiting in Mike Yeo sitting there. And I think this was, as I heard one of the commentators say this morning, this was a bullet in the gun that he was ready to be pulled, the trigger was ready to be pulled, and they pulled it because the Blues just have not done anything. Their goaltending is hideous.
Mm-hmm.
Their defense has not been up to snuff. They only have one player, Tarasenko, I think he's got over 20 goals, but they're not getting a ton of goal scoring. Kevin Shattenkirk is the second leading scorer.
Yeah.
So a change needed to be made. But what did you think of this move?
I don't know. I don't know if a change needed to be made. I respect Doug Armstrong, and he's got a great relationship with Hitch from going back to the Dallas days, and you could tell this hurt him. Yep. And he took all the blame, which is fine. He should. All that said, it's not going to correct their goaltending. Like, at the end of the day, this team's going to end up spinning their wheels if they don't get good goaltending. And clearly they're not going to try Jordan Binnington, so that's out. They're looking at Hutton and Allen, and I just don't think it's enough. And so this is Mike Yeo has been tasked now with getting a team that was supposed to make the playoffs back into playoff contention, and he has two worse goalies than what he left his last team with.
Yeah, they have the worst save percentage in the NHL, which is bad, which is pretty bad because this was a team that played pretty good defense last year and eliminated Chicago in the first round and got to the conference final for the first time in a long time. Things were looking up, but as it was pointed out by Kelly Chase on one of the who's a commentator for the Blues, they lose Backus, they lose Ott, they lose Brouwer. That was a significant chunk of their leadership group, and other players didn't fill that void. So
now I thought I saw something the other day that said Ivan Barbashev they were going to give a look to.
They called him up. They did call him up.
Okay. Now here was the thing about what Chase said. He was like, well, they brought in they brought in Nail Yakupov and et cetera, and it hasn't worked out. It's like, Kelly Chase, don't act like the experiment's over with Nail Yakupov. It's not his fault.
No.
Hitch wasn't exactly playing him in top role minutes either, and he's not going to play that way. So what is Nail Yakupov really going to be able to do for them?
Well, what Chase was talking about, and the thing is, like, okay, those are guys on the periphery. Those really are guys on the periphery where they're not filling the same roles that Backus, Brouwer, and Ott did. Maybe Ott. I mean, they were playing on the third and fourth line, but so those spots were probably guys like Schwartz and Steen and Berg were expected to move, and Fabry were expected to move up in those sort of leadership positions, and they really haven't fulfilled that. But I think right now, listening to what Armstrong said in the press conference, he's blaming the players. He's blaming the players for putting him in this position.
Yep.
And to me, if they don't pull out of this, there's going to be a massive clean out. I don't know if it's all going to be on March 1st or if it's going to wait till the summer, but I think there's going to, he's only got a year left in his contract. He's going to make changes. Yeah,
there's no question. And that's going to be kind of interesting to see how this works out. Look, they still have the horses on defense. No matter what you do, they need to get offense going. Barbashev could be that guy. He's an interesting guy because he's got speed. He plays with toughness. At times, he could look like an Ovechkin light out there if he's playing his game right. And so I'm interested. I'll be watching to see Barbashev play because I've been waiting for this. How long have I been calling for them to bring him up,
At least a year. At least a year.
And this guy gets to the net. He can be good defensively.
Yeah.
So like I said, I think and you know what? Put him with Yakupov. Just see what you got. That could be a very creative. They're both big guys. They're both strong guys. Barbashev's not huge. He's only 6 foot, but he's sturdy. He's 185 pounds, something like that.
Right.
These are guys that can handle themselves, and I think this could light a little fire for St. Louis. They're going to have to.
Yeah, well, Mike Yeo is playing with house money here, so he can experiment, and maybe he'll give him an opportunity. But we'll see. But okay.
In Philly, just so you know, in Philly, it's a thing like if the Sixers win, you hold your cat up. Now this is Anna. She's our latest, and you do that because Ben Simmons did it after a win. So everybody in Philly does this. We don't do this with Anna. I don't use Anna that way. I've told people on social media, not going to happen.
Well, apparently Nazem Kadri, his cat has his own or her own Twitter account. So if you want to follow Jazzy Kadri, go ahead.
Yeah, like I said, people have told me that some of my pets should have their own, but I have 5 pets. I already have 3 accounts. Otherwise, it's just too much.
Yeah, and it would be bad if your cat or your dog had more followers than you. I agree.
It would be. I really would. That would annoy me. I'd be the first to admit it. And I think, look at the cuteness of this. She would have more followers. She's too cute.
For Anna, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.